While the panelists get seated, just giving you all a quick context to what the discussion is going to be about right now. As you all know, India is a relatively young fashion industry compared to the West, right? And reality is that we do straddle between homegrown, owner-led businesses and large corporates. And within that, what typically sort of happens in the approach of creation and design is that it is partly gut-based, right? Because when we're talking about the concept of creation in our industry in India, it is not necessarily the designer that is sort of being part of the evolution of the product angle only. We have a much larger ecosystem that actually participates in this dialogue itself. And so often these decisions are gut-based. Sometimes they're very sort of market preferences, consumer preference-based, watching trend lines, watching your own dynamics and data that sort of stands to work. But the fact is, consumers are constantly changing, environments are constantly changing, and hence, fashion is constantly evolving. And it's important to be able to track that evolution. It's important to be able to understand and predict what these future consumer experiences, wants, and demands would possibly be. Now, it's easy to say, right, that yes, we need to design to the future, but we also know that doing the new is risky. So how does one navigate? How does one accurately able to describe or to be able to predict what would consumers prefer in the future? And to do that, we have an extremely interesting set of panelists that's going to help navigate the concepts between consumer research, trend forecasting, data analytics, and cross-functional collaboration. Because the fact of the matter is, without any of these, we are a one-armed human being, genuinely speaking. So to join me in today's discussion, I'm going to request, my panelist is being very, come on, guys. So we have Puneet Dudeja, Director of Business Development, WGSN. We've got Tarun Kanoria, Head of Planning and Revenue, Fast Fashion in Reliance Retail. Karunesh Vohra, Consultant in the Business of Design. Swati Sood, the Head of Design of Nykaa by Nykaa. And Jagdeep Shokeen, the Head of Design of Fashion Factory. Can you all please join me on stage? Thank you. Great, welcome. Can you guys hear me? Yeah? Am I audible? Sorry? No, right? Audible? Okay, awesome. Thank you, everyone. I think I'm one of the lucky moderators because I'm working with a panel of friends, okay, so, and a very forgiving audience, hopefully, as well. So really looking forward to today's discussion. To get started off, I think must speak to the godfather of the trend forecasting industry and representing that, which is Puneet Dudeja. Puneet, if you can help set context in, how according to you does trend forecasting help brands understand consumer behavior, right? Understand what are consumer expectations in the future, a future that we don't know has yet happened. So how does trend forecasting help brands understand this?
See, it's very, very important. Consumers, the so-called kings and the queens for brands. Do you think they have a say from the audience, the friendly, forgiving audience? Do they have a say? Do we still treat them as kings and queens? They are. But are they really kings and queens? If they are, layman's world, no technology available, a customer is really truly a king and queen, only at a bespoke world. If they walk into a store, they find 5 pieces of a shirt, 5 color options, and the customer is the king or the queen if they ask for the 6th and it's available. But those are the times many years back. Right now we have tools, we have services like ours. And what we've realized is consumer has become the focus, not because they are king or the queen, it's just that they're so unpredictable. We all talk about the Gen Zs, we talk about the millennials and the boomers and the alphas now. But we also need to talk about the Zalphas in between, the Zillennials in between. But these are so generations. People talk about AI. But on the crux of it is that it is extremely an unpredictable world. We can look at a lot of data of what our brands have done, what our brands were doing last season. This color sold well. This season, will this color sell well? Yes, we have tools like WGSN, but what we have done at our organization, that for our trend forecast, which is where we talk about colors, we talk about materials, prints, and our clients follow us. Yes, that's what is being predicted. Let's use that as a direction. We base that on a consumer. What we try to do is try to profile consumers. We know we understand certain demographics. That's very easy. Those are numbers. But between data and your gut, the combination works well. So when you know the buying behavior of a consumer, you can make a right decision. We all know Gen Z is going to become super in the next 5 years.
Right.
But what kind of Gen Z will become super in the next 5 years, where a consumer predictive analytics will help brands at least get a sense of direction, if not exactly the number.
Right. Because that's true. Because I think the biggest starting hallmark of failure is when you stop being relevant, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And tracking consumer therefore becomes extremely important to stay relevant, right? Swati, if you could actually just respond to that, especially, I mean, being a designer who's actively sort of responding to these trend inputs that come in, and the fact that there's also a strong social consumer pulse that also needs to be looked at. And trend cycles are varying constantly. They're getting shorter, they're getting longer. I mean, so, as a designer, what would you like to add to that?
So trend forecasts definitely set up a roadmap for what a designer wants to do. It helps us to stay ahead of the curve. It helps us to innovate more strategically. But I feel today's consumer is not looking for incremental changes in their product. They want a story back change that's going to move markets, that's going to disrupt markets completely. Right. And that comes through an in-depth research on different aspects or trends that are going to be affecting the consumer. So there are consumer trends that we do definitely look at, and I think there are a lot of agencies that are actually capturing them very well and be able to understand consumer behavior. We also need to look at enabler trends, like changes in technology that actually allow certain kind of products to be made with time and with more research in different
I like how you call them enablers.
Enablers. And then there's also another kind of trend which gets developed through how businesses are changing, right? Like whether the kind of innovations that we've seen with D2C, the kind of innovations we've seen with quick commerce, right? So there's a lot, all of these inputs definitely do give us an insight of what to expect. And any new trend doesn't come as a surprise, but we are prepared for that. But what social media, I feel, has done is that the speed of this process has changed dramatically, right? Trends explode on social media, right? And then there's so much of information available to actually sift through that and to figure things that we need to bank upon, figure trends, whether they're long-lasting or they're just momentary. So I think that is something that social media has really disrupted in the last few years. Social media, as far as trend forecasting, according to me, I'm sure Puneet will have a lot to say on that as well, is a double-sided edge, right? A double-edged sword. On one end, we are closer to the consumer. Yeah, real time, we get influence. We can see what's influencing them real time.
Right.
It also opens up direct dialogue with your customer. A designer can actually interact with the customer. We can do trials. We can get feedback, so we get a better idea of what exactly a customer is wanting, and we can make informed decisions so that that are relevant to our specific customer. But at the same time, there's also a bombardment of information, right? You don't know what is right, what will work for you, what will work more importantly for your consumer.
And what has not an immediate but a long-term impact.
But a long-term impact. And also if you tilt too much to these trends which may or may not be short-term, you might end up with products that are not long-lasting, that maybe help you in the next few months or few years, but have nothing to do with your brand build. Right? So I think that with social media, we need to make sure we balance that aspect out, and we figure out a sweet spot which is balances trends that are going to be relevant, concepts that are going to be relevant now, but also that's something that's going to be relevant 10 years from now.
Right. That's interesting. So there are, from what you're saying, I mean, there are a lot of tools available. It's important to be able to track both trend forecasts as well as what social media impulses and information that feeds you in. But, and hence a lot of big data that's available, right?
A lot of data, yes.
Yeah,
I'm sure
right.
Tarun is going to give us insight, but I think predictive data also gives you an idea of which trends you can bank upon, right? So you allocate those kind of resources. It gives you a good judgment of the kind of trends that are going to last and that are going to possibly just fade away with some time.
True. Yeah, at H, we like to call it as, you've got big data analytics and then you've got emotional data, right? Which is less analytics and I think more intuitive science that sort of comes into the picture itself. But before we sort of come back and we dive into the analytics side of things, and I know there's this interesting friction that is constantly happening between the two about what it is to create the new, as well as how do you respond to analytics. But to continue to sort of just set the context of where we are as an industry, because yes, there's a lot of information available, there are a lot of tools that get you this information, and this question is actually going to be directed to Karunesh on the note. I mean, having seen the retail industry genuinely evolve from the time it pretty much began, which was about 3 decades ago. No comment on your age whatsoever, as young and handsome as you always are looking. The fact is that brands still sit with a really large load of unsold inventory. I mean, we are talking about, hey, we are responding to data that's available in-house, engaging with tools that are available that is giving you predictive market data, trend forecasts, etc. But why, according to you, are brands still sitting with so much of unsold inventory, which, as we know, hits directly to the bottom line?
If you break this up into two large portions, there's data, there is past data, analysis, etc.
Right.
And then there is zeitgeist or intuitive data. The focus is largely on past data.
Right.
In my experience, a lot of time is spent on not believing the data to start with. So if you looked at the past data and you used algorithms to come up with fact to give design teams granular briefs on 80% of the range build, that would be useful. So I think a lot of companies try to do that, but surprisingly, opinions on data are also different in the same room, and sometimes by hierarchy. By that I mean the most senior person in the corporate room decides that this is right and this is wrong, which may not be the right way to do it. The second part is intuitive data. Now, trend forecasting, the very word is future-centric.
Yes.
Needs to be, in my opinion, pinpointed to a certain segment or a certain target, and therefore it needs to be micro-trend forecasting. So the last two sessions were about sustainability.
Right.
If micro-trend forecasting, was done sensibly, it would lead to lesser inventory, and half of your long tail would go, and that would be obviously a huge sustainability impact as well. Now the issue is that trend forecasting is a science, and
absolutely,
it is not. It is a combination of data, of socioeconomic factors, of consumer understanding. But as you go down that path, each brand has to ask itself who is their consumer. And very often in organizations, you'll have debates on who the consumer is.
Yeah, and what do they mean to that consumer?
What does that brand solve for that consumer,
yes,
and what is that consumer going to resonate with? So if the forecast is substantial, the story is only 10% told at the product. Then there's communication, there's all of that. So intrinsically, faith in micro trend without too much second guessing would be possibly one of the strongest enablers for creating good product or relevant product, in my opinion.
Right, interesting. Tarun, gonna take this to you. I mean, you've heard it from, how do you say, the right-brained individuals who sort of push that newness, push that, that need for clarity in thinking to bring in that newness about. But coming from someone who I think, you know, where the buck stops with you, right? In deciding where does the business put the money behind. So what, according to you, I mean, to what extent do you believe there's an importance to data analytics and the importance of the collaboration of these, you know, very important right-brain thinkers to bring into the picture itself?
Sure, thanks, Anu. I think there is no second guess in terms of the importance that this collaboration means, right, in terms of analytics, consumer research with design and all. I think the points that we mentioned about bombardment of data, customer being the king and queen, and then what a customer means to each and every fashion firm, all these hold. Now, bringing in the current macro context, right, this collaboration has always been important, but in the current context of the industry, it has become paramount. Right, some of the factors that come to my mind, and I think everybody in the room would be pursuing this in one way or the other. First is more or less everybody's trying to, you know, provide the customer what they want real time. Right, that is the aspiration we all have. Whether we are able to do it or not, that is a secondary thing. But you would want to identify the customer demand and try and fulfill that immediately, right? So there are terms, you know, concept to customer, door to design, mind to market. So all of us in the room, we are trying to figure out ways and means of first, how do we know the right micro trend, as Sir was saying? And second, how do we fulfill that ASAP? And all of this with the condition of not overexposing ourselves on inventory.
Right.
So this is one part of the macro picture that has evolved of late. Second part on the analytics front. Analytics is no more analytics, right? We have been hearing all the buzzwords, right? Analytics becoming intelligence. And then it is evolving to artificial intelligence. And that is where I think what Swati was mentioning about data bombarding, right? So within this whole thing, if I were to put my point of view, now how do we balance all of this, right? So at one point, you're trying to reduce your, you know, concept to customer. So how do you go about doing that? So a lot of things that traditionally we have been doing in terms of market research, et cetera, I think a lot of sweat goes into all of that.
Right.
But with so much of data and so much of tool which is available, obviously with some filters so that it is not bombarding enough, we are able to you know, help out design and buying teams with the relevant data which is applicable for that particular company and for that particular customer.
Right.
Right? So that kind of reduces the overall concept timeline, right? Similarly, down the line also, there are many such data models that are upcoming and that we are putting together that reduces a lot of that manual effort that was going in earlier, right? At the same time, when it comes to real-time on-demand fashion, right? Earlier, like take 7 years back, we were talking about seasonal planning. Gradually, I think everybody in the room would agree, we are moving to more of a monthly dynamic range architecture. So I was talking about range architecture. Earlier, when we would do a range architecture in October for you know, something which would launch in the next autumn winter. Right now, we are talking about doing a range architecture now for something which would be launching in 15th March or 20th March.
Yeah, and I believe pandemic was a huge catalyst in that thinking as well.
So to enable all of this, we have data which was already there, but now with e-commerce growing, as you know, we are able to track each and every element of the customer journey and each and every element of the product that is being sold on those portals, right? Earlier, when e-commerce was not big, I think we had all of these challenges. But as this has progressed, right, from analytics to intelligence to AI, we are gradually moving there. And in my belief, this movement is quite fast of late.
Right.
And very soon, we'll realize a vision of not fast fashion, but in my view, real-time on-demand fashion. If we are able to reduce that design timeline backward of all this intelligent data models.
Okay. Jagdeep, I'm actually going to sort of bounce it off with you because, so we heard keywords like real-time fashion, reducing concept to, you know, to to retail as a timeline perspective or concept to product. We've talked about being able to really quickly assimilate and disseminate data, information, etc. But what, I mean, as a designer, how are you seeing, how are you navigating, especially in a space which is mass market, where every decision has a very, very wide impact? You're not speaking to a niche consumer base itself. But how do you navigate all of this? Because we're speaking about doing it quickly, doing a lot of it, and also the fact that somebody else being AI, doing it for you. So what's the role of creativity in this entire space?
Thanks, Anu. And rightly put, there is no margin of error.
Right.
And I'll just go back 10 years in the past. Fashion used to come as a very slow wave. You had time to catch it, you had time to encash it, and then you had time to know when to leave it, right? Today's scenario is such that fashion is coming like a tsunami. If you don't catch it at the right moment, it'll hit you. And then you won't know what hit you. Consumer today is expressive, is educated, and elusive. Like, you don't know where your consumer is. You had to find him. The average attention span of a Gen Z is 1.3 seconds.
Right.
And then we are moving to Gen Beta and Gen Alpha. It's going to further reduce. So how do we tackle this? So I'll take Karunesh's point further, and I completely agree with him, that there are two kinds of data. We used to study earlier. It was past data. Insight was, say, 10% or 15%.
Right.
But right now, it's exactly the opposite. We are seeing it when we check our sell-through data. A style which sold really, really well, which is probably 80% sell-through, if we try and repeat it, it does not sell.
Yeah, absolutely.
So past data is completely redundant. I mean, you can use it and you can still, deep dive and filter it down. If you need to do a product which has sold well, you may.
Right.
But I think the need of the hour is insight. Apart from data, which is previous data, what is the insight that you're getting? And insight is really, really important to know what the consumer needs. So the 3 E's I mentioned,
right.
The customer is expressive, educated, and elusive. Now, when it comes to us, how do we take this challenge? I think, again, 3E, we have to embrace the consumer. As Nidhi rightly pointed, you need to know where your consumer is, go to the consumer, spend some time with him.
Absolutely.
Have empathy with the consumer, know why is he behaving in the way he's behaving.
Right.
I interact with my kids and I see future consumers in them. And on weekends, I actually shop with them. My elder son goes to a product, he picks it up, he says, I don't relate to this, and he drops it. That's it.
Right.
That's their reaction. So the products, and we used to have this good, better, best filter, right? In all our range architecture, all the range categories that we used to have. My learning is, good does not exist. If you make a good product, it may sit on the floor. Every product has to be better and best. It has to be wow.
Absolutely.
Because the attention span, 1.3 seconds.
Right.
You have to catch that guy. If he does not like your product, he will just leave it. He will not even tell you why he didn't like. He may just utter a word, skibbity, and you won't know what that expression is. So we have to know where our consumer is. Strategy, 3 E's again.
Right.
Embrace, empathy, and execute. I think we spend a lot of time procrastinating, debating whether we should do this. But I think with the insight and with the insight velocity, we need to build in our design structure, even buying and merchandising.
Sure.
We need to execute our steps and then see how it goes.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that because, quite often there's a lot said, yes, in a boardroom, but very rarely is followed through with the same sense of integrity and intent to make sure that, and when I'm saying follow through, it's not about just creating the product, but taking it to the consumer in the manner it was meant to be, so to truly see it succeed itself. But coming back on that, and I think some very interesting, I love the ease, okay? It's totally sort of stuck in my head, so love the ease. But just sort of bouncing it back with Puneet here, you know, there seems to be a lot of acknowledgement from the panelist side, right, from both sides about the importance of all of the tools that are available that surround research and trend forecasting. But the reality is, if you look at India as a market, and I'm talking about a market that's much wider than the 10, 12 corporates that exist, right? We are actually easily about 78% a semi-organized industry itself. And also very economically and culturally diverse industry, right? How is you know, WGSN trying to sort of navigate that, to be able to sort of, because to Karunesh's point where the risk of an inaccurate product is extremely high, right, is extremely high, and it starts from research. So how is WGSN sort of trying to navigate that piece?
Okay, just to instill, so we are not a Western wear trend forecasting company. That's what the impression has been over the years. But just to let you know, in terms of consumer, what Jagdeep mentioned, and the ease were excellent. Knowing what to give to the consumer, it's more than the product, it's more of an experience. Now, when we look at consumers, when I said that we look at consumers first before we say that, yes, that's the color palette for the season. It's not just the color palette for the season because it's dependent on numbers. For us, number is a small portion, not even 10%.
Right.
It's just to get predictive analytics, as Tarun mentioned, just to understand, yes, there is certain context on how something has evolved. But when you try to understand a consumer, just for example, when we look at consumers, we don't look at it from a Western sense or a continental sense. We look at it from cross. It's generation, a generation Gen Z in India versus a Gen Z in China versus a Gen Z in America, and how they can easily influence each other. We have social media, so we do a lot of TikTok analytics. India expand, we do a lot of Instagram analytics. The idea is to understand the pulse of each and every consumer.
Right.
And why has it become important? Like, just to give an example, in the next 2 years, we are talking a lot on our website about something which we call as glimmers. It's a profile, it's also a thought. The consumer of today, whether it's a Gen Z or a millennial, typically these are the two bases because these are the most people who will have the most spending power in the next 5 years.
Right.
The only thing they're looking at from any brand they purchase, whether it's fashion or non-fashion, are moments of joy. So we had a panel, we were doing jury we had sessions on VM. So when I was judging them, it was not about, yes, today's AI, digital, it was a moment of joy.
Right.
I saw one session, you presented your panel, I think Louis Philippe did that. It was excellent because you gave customer a moment of joy. You attracted a customer, they came to the store, and then yes, they had realized that this is something trending. Yes, I need an oversized tee. As a millennial, why? Because the Gen Z is wearing it. Now it's fine. We see so many corporates. Look at 3 years back, IFF, 4 years back. We had all formal dressing. Now we have mixed bags.
Yeah.
We have sneakers being adopted. It's an evolution from a non-Gen Z profiling over here. So when you try to understand that, there is a difference which we also try to bring in. So when we look at our profiling, we try to give examples from India. We look at emerging economies. We look at the country with the maximum young population in the world. So those are aspects which at WGSN we've already started adopting. We're going to make it a lot more stronger because for us, the focus is as a business, we are talking about brands being, you need to evolve as brands. We ourselves as a business are evolving. We have changed the way we report.
Right.
We have changed the way we try to give trends so that when our clients use our services, it's not just कि ठीक है 12 colors हैं, इनमें से कुछ 6 pick कर लेते हैं. नहीं, ये 12 colors क्यों आए हैं? ये 6 आप pick कर सकते हो कि नहीं कर सकते हो? Does it match with your previous data? Okay, this is the right bet. Let's bet on, to your point, on these 3 colors because then it's a authority, researched, backed analytics which you can bring consumer to the forefront. And then yes, as creative people.
Right.
And I always say, so I'll take this time, we do not have time to be creative at work. None of you guys have. You are all from the creative industry, but there is a statistics which says you only spend 25% of time being creative at work. 75% of time, you're all concerned about the top lines and the bottom lines. As a designer, manager ने बोला है, productivity है, इतने design samples चाहिए. sell-through rates. We talk about ROI. So we are 75% of the time we are just wasting on being productivity. So that's where this research
Right.
done by consulting firms like yours as well is very, very crucial.
Right. No. But I'm just gonna, Karunesh, if you could still circle back to what I was trying to get at, because I think being both from as a consultant as well as on being on the client side of things, and having gone through the repertoire of brands that you have looked after, if you had to really say that, what's the one key thing that most brands, and I'm using the brands, I'm talking about departments across brands, right? Because to make a product successful in the industry is a lot more than just a creator or just a designer. So what, according to you, is that missing link that is there today?
It's a simple alignment.
Right.
When an average idea, and this is not original, not mine, I think Mr. Vikram Rao said this, an average idea well executed is far better than an exceptional idea poorly executed. So in my experience in the corporate world, a lot of time goes, like he's saying that the 25% time is on creativity is absolutely right, and that should be the other way around.
Yeah.
And that's where these tools come in. Now the other side is the human aspects of corporates in India. How much of our time do we spend in making reports to
Right.
prove to a line manager that what I'm thinking is right?
Right.
How many years do you need to keep doing that? So I'm saying that the efficiency of time, the efficacy of data, the truth of an insight is all it is.
Right.
So it's simple to say, difficult to do. Yeah.
Quite often, rarely follow through. How are we on time? I just want to know. We've got 5 minutes? Okay, so all right, so okay. No, we've got 5 minutes, so. I think, sorry, I broke my line of thought there. But, like we were talking about it, as Karunesh says, it seems to be quite simple. It's common sense. And I'm sure a lot of us here would be like, yeah, I mean, that's true. But the reality is, and I think all of us can agree here, is the fact that brands tend to change when leadership changes, when teams within it change, right? Their expressions tend to change because the design head moved on. And somewhere there is this element of subjectivity that consistently sort of keeps applying on. And to this, Swati and Tarun, I think we can wrap up with both of you all sort of adding to this, and starting with you, Swati, on what, according to you, and I'm asking you specifically because even with, the recent, the recent prowess of Night by Nykaa, which has been so consistent, and I know it's more of a commoditized technical brand, but there's a certain degree of consistency that is sort of being seen there, which is why I think you'd be an expert to be able to comment on this. So what, according to you, should be, and I'm not saying that, I think we all know what needs to be done, but or what isn't done, but what, according to you, should brands be considering more to ensure there is a stronger objective approach to absorbing all of these research and tools that exist?
I think when we say what should brands do, we have to identify and understand there are different kinds of brands. There are brands who do 100 products, and there are brands who do 18 products in a year, right?
Right.
There are brands that can afford to quickly bring things to the market. There are brands that take at least 1 year to develop one sample, right? So I think the context changes from brand to brand. And I love the fact that Puneet brought up joy as a key constant. And I find that if we place ourselves and place the brand on a trend that is going to last, and that's going to that can also is modular in nature, can keep getting twisted into what is trending right now. I think that while we'll be able to stay true to the brand, we will also be able to stay true to the changing dynamics, the changing influences in the markets as well. So I feel being able to identify stories, being able to identify communities that you want to be part of, that are resilient to time, that would change, that can modify and adapt, and can be perceived differently by different kinds of consumers, is something that is going to give a longer lasting product as well.
Right.
So, but like I said, every business model is different. So it would change from business model to business model.
Tarun, would you like to add to that and kind of help wrap up this?
Yeah, sure. So agree with what Swati is saying. The ethos and the customer preference that each brand has differs, right? And to your point, how do we make it consistent irrespective of any kind of a leadership change? Now that is something which is hard to do. Even when we use data, right, like Karunesh was saying, right? So we spend a lot of time trying to put data in the way the manager or the boss wants to see, right? So it will be really difficult even when we use data to maintain that, unless we adopt a strategy wherein we have an approach clearly aligned. So let's say a scenario where the design head changes, but the design philosophy is very creative-led, right?
Right.
So in that case, a data might not be able to help.
Right.
But in a data-oriented system where the design team is consuming inspiration which is coming from a lot of data, right? Like we were talking about, okay, on social media, we are seeing a trend like oversized tees peaking, right? If the DNA of the org is that we are going to rely only and only on that, in that case, yes, we can still maintain that ethos. But without that, I think it will be difficult for any brand to continue with the same principles that was pre-existing.
Right, so it's not as simple an answer as one can possibly hope to be. Okay, I think our time is up, and thank you so much, panelists, for that interesting, your points of view on the entire topic itself. We're leaving. But I think just to sort of summarize from today's discussion, I just sort of made a note, a couple of points itself. I think first and foremost was that it's not an either-or situation. Very often we see brands, labels, manufacturers saying that, oh, I've got predictive analytics and I look at that, or I subscribe to a trend forecast and that's enough. But the reality of the situation is you do need all four. You need consumer research, trend forecasting, data analytics, as well as cross-functional collaboration. Because from what all of you all have said, is that when the cross-functional collaboration happens is when it stops being a subjective point of view, but a more objective point of view. The second one is, I think investing in research equals investing in risk mitigation. And that recognition itself can hugely sort of enable and help companies to really sort of both improve their bottom lines as well as reduce the waste that we seem to be adding to landfills. Innovation, like what Swati had said, actually stems from social empathy, and I think keeping our ears really close to the ground is extremely important, and I think that seems to be a recurring theme that's come across multiple presentations today. And the fact that I think the need for, as Tarun mentioned, need for higher reactivity for real-time fashion itself, and the limited time that we have to be able to go on to execute it. So the ability or to be more proactive to adopt technology to do the part that they do it quicker, right? And then to leave human more to the creativity of doing the unknown. I think if we can sort of bring those two together amongst the teams itself, would really sort of start, as an industry, we'd be able to address the future consumer a lot better. Jagdeep, I think your E's were great, and in fact, Karunesh added a couple of E's to the whole piece itself. I think that's going to be really a key takeaway, and I think they made a note of 7 E's altogether. Thank you so much, and I hope all of you all enjoyed your session.